Welcome into Miami Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. I am Nic Rohloff. On today's show, we are looking at Dolphins free agent targets after the NFL draft, because after the UDFA signings and the 7 players Chris Grier drafted in the draft, the current roster sits at 87 players, which would allow them to sign 3 guys. Now, I don't expect them to go to full capacity just yet, and they'll let it probably play out over the next 2 or 3 months, but that is where we currently sit. And I do think it's important to note that the cap space for Miami isn't really there right now, only at $3 million in total, but after June 1st, when Xavier Howard's money comes off the books, the Dolphins will have just about $21 million in cap space, which will allow them to sign most of their players in the NFL draft and potentially go out and sign an NFL free agent. Before we dive into 10 free agent targets for Miami, I want to make sure you are part of the Noti gang. We have 56,090 subscribers in total, and only 8.5 thousand of you guys have your notifications turned on, aka 15.1%. If the Dolphins do sign someone, we will come at you with a video, and hell, there's even a chance we go live on the channel to break it down. So if you want to be up to date and be the first person to know when the Dolphins make a move or have any rumors around the player, hit that sub button and turn notifications to on for all, not personalized, but all. All right, let's jump into one of the first guys, and it has to be Odell Beckham Jr., right? Just because there's been so much buzz and rumors surrounding OBJ and Miami. I mean, obviously, if you went back to free agency in the weeks leading up to the draft, there was a ton of rumors linking OBJ and Miami. There's that need at wide receiver 3. Now, the question I have is, did the Dolphins do enough to fill that void with 2 wide receivers being taken in round 6 and 7? We'll talk about that in just a second. But I do want to go back to this quote that Mike McDaniel had at the NFL owners meeting back in February before the NFL draft and stuff like that. He said we did make him an offer that takes business time, especially with players such as Odell, who's had a phenomenal career. He still has really good football in front of them and has options. So I do find it fascinating that Mike McDaniel, back in then, did acknowledge the fact that they did offer a contract to Odell Beckham Jr. And I don't want you guys to think that this is some player that would come into Miami and be an unbelievable player, because he has gone through quite a bit. I mean, his last elite season was back in 2019 when he was with the Cleveland Browns. He's battled a lot of injuries, was a nice piece on that Ravens offense a year ago, but that's all he is now. Mike McDaniel hit it right on the head. I mean, he's had a phenomenal career and he has good football ahead of him, but he is not the guy that can be a headliner of a wide receiver room. He is a wide receiver 3 at this point in his career. That's nothing wrong. There's nothing bad with that, and he would be a great complement to Jaylen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, because he can play on the outside, he can play on the inside, he can go up and make contested catches. OBJ would be a good fit in this wide receiver room. But my question is, will Chris Grier want to add a wide receiver after drafting 2 in the NFL draft? They took Malik Washington out of UVA in round 6, who I'm very bullish on. If you've watched the past content over the past 4 or 5 days, you would know that. And they also took Taj Washington in the 7th round out of USC. And I know those 2 guys were drafted super late, but they do possess a lot of talent in things that can really add to this wide receiver room. So I'm not so sure Miami really is going to go the route at wide receiver in free agency. But what say you? Should they bring in a wide receiver? Let me know in the comment section. If you think they should still sign OBJ or any wide receiver, type Y for yes or type N for no. I do want to mention these 2 guys as well, because if they do go the wide receiver route, these 2 would be a very good option on the cheap. Marquez Valdes-Scantling and DJ Chark. The reason why these 2 intrigue me is because they're deep threats and they can play that X position, big-bodied wide receivers on the outside. And if you're Chris Grier, and if I'm Chris Grier, I'm going after a wide receiver that can play on the perimeter and really threaten the defense deep and be a big red zone threat, because Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle, Malik Washington, like all these guys that Miami is going to throw the ball to, they're all under 6 foot. So it would be nice to bring in a 6+ foot wide receiver to this room. I'd go after a bigger wide receiver. The only wide receiver right now that is really anything of size is Easy E. Yeah, so you don't really have a consistent big-bodied wide receiver to throw to. You look at the crew. Like, River Raycraft is above 6 feet, but Hill, Waddle isn't. Malik Washington's 5'8". Braxton Berrios does not reach that mark either. Like, you don't have a lot of size. It's a very talented room, don't get it twisted, but it is not one that has a lot of big bodies in it. I would still like to bring in potentially a more traditional X wide receiver that can play on the perimeter, but I do like the top 3, and yes, I would have Malik Washington as my wide receiver 3/slot if the season started today. I think he's going to be a dog for Miami. All right, let's move over to the offensive line, and we'll combine these two right here, Dalton Riser and Greg Van Roten, 2 offensive guards. And listen, if you've been with us for the past 4 or 5 days, and honestly with Tom Downey hosting prior to me, you would know that the biggest need on this roster right now is right guard, because you lost Robert Hunt on a 5-year, $100 million deal to the Carolina Panthers, and your replacement right now is Robert Jones. You still have Teron Armstead, Austin Jackson, and Isaiah Wynn, but you have a new starting center and Aaron Brewer on a 3-year, $21 million deal after Connor Williams tore his ACL, which we'll talk about him in just a second. And Jones slots in as that Hunt replacement. Now, I don't know if you guys feel that comfortable with him. I particularly don't, so that's why bringing in Risner or Van Roten could be intriguing to me. Now, if you ask me which of these 2 guys is a better fit in Miami, I would say Greg Van Roten, because he has played right guard for the most of his career, and in 2023 for the Las Vegas Raiders, he had 1,024 snaps at right guard. Dalton Risner is someone who's experienced and very solid, and he's played offensive guard his entire career. The only issue is that it has been at left guard. He's never played anywhere but left guard. So could he make the transition to right guard? I think he could. Veteran guy, formerly Denver and Minnesota. Be intrigued to see if Risner would be a pick for Miami. I know a lot of fans want him, but I honestly think Van Roten's a better fit if you want a starting caliber right guard that's still on the market. 5 more NFL free agents to get to that could be a perfect fit for the Miami Dolphins, but a perfect fit for you is Prize Picks, the best daily fantasy sports app on the market. And yes, Miami Dolphins football is a long way from being back, but you can play Prize Picks in the preseason, so just remember that. But there is still NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, MLB. You got the Heat. They could be done after today, but if not, you still can play them. You got the Panthers advancing in the NHL. The Marlins are still playing. So if you're in Miami, you can still take some of these teams. For tonight's pick, I got more than on Bam Adebayo, 21.5 points. I'll take our big man inside to get more than. And they're also giving you a discount on James Harden points, 17.5 rather than 21.5. I'll take the more than on that. Just 2 entries here, but you can win up to 100 times your money with 4 player stat projections. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Get started with the best daily fantasy sports app. Right now, they have deals for new users, returning users, the whole 9 yards. Once again, download the app, code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100, or just go into the description and comments, click on that link, prizepicks.com/CLNS, and use code CLNS. Let's go back to an old friend here. Connor Williams, the offensive lineman who played his last 2 years in Miami, obviously played center for the Dolphins, but he has experience playing left guard for the Dallas Cowboys before he came over to Miami. And I'd love to bring him back. Now, I don't know when he is going to be able to return. He did tear that ACL back in November against the Tennessee Titans on Monday Night Football, but it would be ideal if you can bring him back as a depth piece and let him recover from that injury, because he can play right guard. And one of the best things about Aaron Brewer as well, who you signed on that 3-year deal, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, he is a starting caliber center in the NFL, but he has also had experience playing guard in the National Football League. And if you just look at the numbers for Connor Williams in his 2 seasons for the Dolphins, well, yes, the sacks and the penalties aren't great, but the PFF numbers are absolutely fantastic, and he was playing like one of the best centers in all of football. Like I mentioned, though, I do want to remind everyone that he would not be ready to start week 1 in all likelihood. This would be something that you have on your bench, get him on a really cheap deal, and then work him back. And when he is ready to return midway through the season, if you still have issues on that interior offensive line, that's when Connor Williams can come back. I know he's had some issues snapping before, as I know from Will Scott, as he was very adamant about his hate towards Connor Williams. But I still think he's a valued member of this team. He is an excellent blocker. And if you do move him back to right guard or left guard or whatever you want to do when he returns and leave Aaron Brewer at center, he is very good at blocking. So I think it would work out for Miami. We just talked about 3 interior offensive linemen the Dolphins can sign. If you had to pick one, let me know who would it be. DR for Dalton Riser, GVR for Greg Van Roten, or CW, not the TV station, for Connor Williams. All right, 2 interior defensive linemen here, Calais Campbell and Lawrence Guy. There is still a massive hole on this roster, and I said the biggest need is right guard for Miami. You could convince me it's on the interior defensive line because this group is not great. Zach Zeeler is an excellent rotation and second guy. Like him and Christian Wilkins had a great duo forming inside for Miami. Is Zeeler ready to take that next step as that lone dude? I don't know. I do like Teair Tart, but I am skeptical because of how bad he played for Houston. But when he was with Tennessee 2 seasons ago, I liked his game. Neville Gallimore will be interesting to see if he can do anything, but I would be very intrigued by bringing in Lawrence Guy or Calais Campbell. They are both very, very experienced, both, I believe, 35-plus years in age. I know Calais Campbell is, but they're both great teammates. They've both been Walton Payton Man of the Year nominees, and I believe actually I think Campbell won it, if I am not mistaken. So they're great teammates. They'd come in. They'd be able to help young guys rotate in, and they are good defensive run stoppers as well. I'd be a big fan of bringing in Campbell or Lawrence Guy to this defensive lineman room. All right, 2 more to get to. The first being Justin Simmons, the safety formerly of the Denver Broncos. If you just go pound for pound, the best free agent available across all positions, it is Justin Simmons. And I got to be honest with you guys, I still want another safety. I know we still have Jaylen Holland, and we brought in Jordan Poyer, but this room could use a third guy. Holland and Poyer are absolute studs. Those 2 will form an excellent duo for Miami on the back end, but I'm just not sold on Campbell and McMorris being that third guy. You have 2 UDFAs in Colbert and Mark Perry, and you drafted McMorris in the 6th round, but I'm not sold. And I have said multiple times since I've taken over this channel that I think Jaylen Holland will be best suited playing in a Kyle Hamilton-esque role that was in that Baltimore Ravens defense a year ago. If you were not aware, Anthony Reaver, the new DC for the Dolphins, is coming from that Ravens scheme and system. So they run a lot of 3 safety sets. 3-3-5 could be a potential for Miami. And if you have Simmons and Poyer floating on the back end with Jaylen Holland rotating, whether in the nickel or just being a rover, being in the box because he's a willing tackler, I think it would do justice for this Dolphins defense and really bring the best out of Holland and Miami's back end. Simmons is still productive, man. 2023, 70 tackles, 8 PBUs, 3 INTs. He's not the top 5 safety that he once was 2 or 3 seasons ago for Denver, but he's still a top 15 guy in the NFL. You bring him in, you'd have the best safety room in the NFL without a doubt of Simmons, Holland, and Poyer. It would just allow you versatility. And with 2 older gentlemen in Simmons and Poyer, if you did bring them in, you do have some depth as well in case one of them gets hurt. The last one is Quandre Diggs. I'm not going to talk too in-depth about Quandre because, well, he is not as good as Justin Simmons, but he would provide a lot of the same things that Simmons would, just on a lower level. He is also cheaper than Justin Simmons because Simmons is probably the best free agent out there. I don't know how Miami would be able to bring him in unless it was for a little bit of a cheaper deal. But, hey, no state income tax does have it going for Miami at least, so that could be a persuasive option. But Quandre Diggs, he's cheaper, not as good, but would still allow Jaylen Holland to float around more often, which is something I want to see. Now, get in the comment section and name a free agent the Dolphins should sign. My top guys would probably be Justin Simmons, Greg Van Roten. I can't really convince myself on going wide receiver. I know we led off today's video with it, but I think this wide receiver room is actually pretty set, so I'm staying away, but name a free agent you want the Dolphins to sign. Also, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Nic_Rohloff. I'm tweeting about the Dolphins, the Heat every single day. I got everything covered for the Miami sports town. So follow me over there. And if the Dolphins do sign someone, I'll have it on my Twitter first. So you'll get the news broken on Twitter and then come here for the full in-depth analysis on Dolphins Today. I'll see you in the next video. Go Fins.